Awesome. All righty. All right. So let's get us started on page 72. So we're going to pick up where we left off last week, page 72. And it's actually a really exciting place to start because we're in chapter 6 and the chapter is called Into Action. Now, if you've been coming with us along on this big book study, you're like, girl, what are you talking about into action? What was that whole 4-step inventory that I did? That was not like propsing around through the tulips. Like I was doing some work. Yes. And now we're into even more action. And one of the things I love about this chapter, welcome to those who just joined. We're on page 72, the chapter Into Action. And one of the things I love about the chapter Into Action is that it is into action, not into thinking about it, not into talking about it, not into intellectualizing the whole process, but into action. And what I need is to do and to take action. And that's really good news. Now, if you're joining us and you're like me, you're like, girl, no, it is not. It is not good news. You're going to ask me to do some things, and probably some things in this chapter that I do not want to do. But what's wonderful about that is that they are actions that I can take. I don't have to know better. I don't have to be smarter. I just have to follow the directions in this book. All righty. So let's get into it. So it says, having made our personal inventory, what shall we do about it? So we have this inventory. We took it in the 4th step. What are we going to do with it? It says, we have been trying to get a new attitude and a new relationship with our Creator, and to discover the obstacles in our path. And that simple sentence explains what I'm trying to do here with these 12 steps. I need a new attitude and a new relationship with my Creator. And if you've kind of been around this study for a little while, you know that I love finding sneaky descriptions of a spiritual awakening. And that is one. What I need is a new attitude and a new relationship. And then it says, and to discover the obstacles in my path. And so the obstacles that are in my path are exactly what I saw in my 4th step. It is my resentments. And then when I saw in my resentments, I was making decisions based on selfishness, dishonesty, self-seeking, fear that was putting myself in a position to be hurt. Those are the obstacles. Then I look at my fears. Those are the obstacles, the stuff in me that's blocking me off from that relationship with that power that is greater than myself. And the sex conduct, that's often blocking me too. And the guilt and shame and remorse that carries, it blocks me. So that's what we're trying to do. We're seeing what's in the way and just clear it away. So it says, we have admitted certain defects. And I love going through the book line by line and saying, is that my experience? So as we went through step 1, we would be like, is that my experience? Did I experience the allergy? Did I experience the obsession? But now that I have my 4th step, can I ask myself, have I admitted certain defects? Is that my experience? Have I ascertained in a rough way what the trouble is? Ascertained is like figured out. Have I kind of figured out, do I get a bit of a lens on what the trouble is? And it says, we have put our finger on the weak items in our personal inventory. Was I able to see those patterns of selfishness, those patterns of self-centeredness, those patterns of self-seeking? Was I able to see that? And then I love this. It says, now these are about to be cast out. Cast out. Not, I overcame them. Not, I won. Not, I defeated them, but cast out. Taken from me. Gone. And this really ties in with 6 and 7. See, well, no, you know what? I'm going on a little mini 6 and 7 tangent, but I'm going to bring it right back around. I promise it won't be long. So one of the things is in 6 and 7, I am not in the defect removal business. What I am at is in the willingness to have the defects removed business and the surrender department, like offering them up to the God of my understanding. And so what I'm going to do in the 5th step is I'm going to get a lens into what these defects of character are. And when I see them so clearly, I'm willing to have them go. I'm willing to have them taken away, and then I ask. And this is kind of a 6 and 7 thing, but what I want to point out is in the 5th step, and that's really what we're preparing ourselves for, is this 5th step where we share the contents of our inventory with God and another human being. In the 5th step, it talks about the exact nature of our wrongs. And then in 6, it talks about our defects of character and our shortcomings, 6 and 7. And so when we look at that, my defects of character, my shortcomings, and the exact nature of my wrongs are the exact same thing. And I'm just going to get a better lens on the truth of them and to see really the amount that they are blocking me from that power which is greater than myself. So this requires, action on our part. Oh, it's almost like this whole chapter is called Into Action. It's a whole lot of work is what I'm hearing. This requires action on our part, which when completed will mean that we have admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our defects. This brings us to the 5th step in the program of recovery mentioned in the preceding chapter. So, I honestly could have just waited literally a sentence and that tangent would have flowed quite naturally, but that's not always how I do. And so when we talk about the 5th step, ultimately what I am doing is I'm taking the contents of my inventory and I'm admitting them to another human being and to God, as well as to myself, right? And one of the things, my very, very first ever sponsor, she really emphasized another human being, that I'm no better, that I'm no worse, that we truly are all equal. And my very first sponsor, she said, Paige, there's 2 types of people. There's people who stand on the pile of mess. Now, this was her. Stand on the pile of mess and it's like, yeah, look at the mess I made. I'm a badass. I ruined everything. That's not me. I'm the other one, which is hiding under that pile of mess. Look at the mess I made. I'm a terrible, awful human being. I'm the biggest pile and piece of garbage that ever lived. That's where I was. But it's important to know, especially in 12th step, that we are just another human being. No better, no worse. And if I'm going through this process with my sponsor, I want you to know my experience really is that, those deep, dark secrets, we're not alone. We're not alone. I have received, I couldn't even count how many 5th steps in my life. And I want you to know there is not a single thing I have not heard. Now, I'm not hanging out at San Quentin or, I'm going to some big fancy place to receive some hardcore 5th step. I'm just receiving average run-of-the-mill 5th steps. And it's important for me to understand if there is a word for it and I can write it down on my 4th step, or if there's a word for it and I can say it. What that means is we had to have language to describe it. And so we're not alone. And the other thing I want to say is if that thing, that deep, dark secret that I don't want to share, if there's a law against it, you know what that means? That means that so many of us were doing it, that the government had to get involved and say, no, cut it out, no more. And I just want you to know, whatever that is, you are not alone. And so when it looks at admitting, there's 2 ways to look at admitting. One is a bit of a confession, right? So I need to admit, I need to confess that, and this is the one I always use, I need to confess that I stole your car, I slept with your husband, and I peed on your carpet, right? I'm just kidding. I would never. It was linoleum. Yeah. So that is one way to look at admit. The other way to look at admit is if you go to a sporting event. Let's say you go to a hockey game or a football game, or you go to a play or a concert. On that ticket, it says admit 1. And another way to look at the word admit is not simply just a confession, but perhaps also letting in another human being and letting in that power which is God. And I think that's a beautiful way to do it and to look at it. And so as we break down this part of the chapter, first because here's the thing I love about the big book is it always meets me where I'm at. And so what we're going to do is we're going to start with, why do we have to do a fifth step? That is the first thing that we're going to start with. You know why? Because none of us really was like, oh, I would love to do that. I'm so excited. I can't wait to share the contents of my inventory with another human being. I'm enthusiastic about that whole idea. And it's not like I have a fear of rejection or abandonment, and those were the first two things on my fears list. No. I have no qualms with this step at all, right? So the book is meeting us where we're at and giving us good reason why I should do a fifth step. So it says this is perhaps difficult, especially discussing ourselves with another person, because we don't want to. It says, we think we have done well enough in admitting these things to ourselves. I'm like, I did the inventory. It's good. I got it. I got this. If you're wondering, I don't got nothing. Nothing. I don't got nothing. I got to take this to God and to another human being. Always. Now, so it says, there is doubt about that. There is doubt about that. In actual practice, we usually find a solitary self-appraisal insufficient. And what I want to point out is that solitary self-appraisal is insufficient in regards to the fifth step. But also, as I go through this way of life and I get to the 10th step, what I will see is a solitary self-appraisal is insufficient there too. And what a solitary self-appraisal is, if you don't know, because when I got here, I didn't know, what the heck are we talking about? So a solitary self-appraisal is me looking at me and deciding what I need to do and what my defects of character are and how the amends is going to look, me looking at me. And there's this famous AA speaker, and his name's Bob D. And he has this saying, and it's that you can't see the label of the jar from the inside. See, I'm inside, right? And I can't see what's really going on. And so that line of solitary self-appraisal is insufficient. It's not enough. Many of us thought it necessary to go much further. We will be more reconciled to discussing ourselves with another person when we see good reasons why we should do so. The best reason first. If we skip this vital step, we may not overcome drinking. So that is something, if you're writing in your book, highlight, underline, you can put some stars beside. If I do not do a fifth step, I am likely to relapse. If I do not do a fifth step, I am likely to drink again. And you'll notice there's a couple places in this book where it gives us very, very stark warning. If I do not do this, I will drink. Now, one of the other examples we saw last week was when we're writing in and around our sex ideal, right? If I do not have a sex ideal, and if I do not live up to that sex ideal, I am quite sure to drink. We are not theorizing. These are facts out of our experience. Similarly, if I do not do a fifth step, I am quite sure to drink. And it's implying as well, if I don't do a searching and fearless fifth step, if I don't share all of that stuff, if I don't get it all out, I am sure to drink. And here's where it's talking about that. It says, time after time, newcomers have tried to keep to themselves certain facts about their lives. Because what are the facts I'm trying to keep about myself? It's not when I did a nice thing for somebody. It's not, when I was like a really good girlfriend and really thoughtful and kind and considerate. No. It's none of that. It's that deep, dark secret. Oftentimes, it's that thing that I think separates me from you, separates me from humanity, and separates me from God. That thing that I think if you really knew that I did this, you'd surely reject me. There's nobody else who's ever done this. That thing I want to go to my grave with, that. That's what I'm trying to keep to myself. And one of the things that I talk about a lot is that I cannot feel serenity and self-centeredness at the same time. And that deep, dark secret. Now, that deep, dark secret, why I'm referring to it as self-centeredness, is because when I'm in that place of shame, and shame is that awful, terrible emotion, right? What am I thinking about? I'm thinking about me and how awful I am and how I'm the worst person that ever lived, right? And we got 25 people here on the call today. I want you to know that deep, dark secret, somebody's done it in this call. Probably like more than once, probably a whole bunch of times. You know what I mean? They were probably having a lot of fun with it, that deep, dark secret. And so the truth is we are so not alone. But when I hold on to it, I live in that place of separateness. And ultimately, I cannot live in that state of separateness from God. So it says, trying to avoid this humbling experience, they turn to easier methods. I'll only tell you some of it. Or I don't really need to do a fifth step. I got it. It's all in my head. I got it. That is not where we need to keep it. Our head is the worst place for it, right? And it says almost invariably. And that means almost without exception, almost always they got drunk. So again, another warning, right? I need to get this stuff out. And honestly, if you're new and if you haven't done a fifth step or you have something in your heart that's holding, gosh, I know how hard it is for me to be like, get it out, share it with at least one person, a trusted person. But there is so much freedom in learning that we are not alone. Going on another quick tangent, and then I'm going to bring it back. At least I tell you it's happening. For me, it really was that fifth step when I learned about the unconditional nature of God's love. And it wasn't when I did my first fifth step, when I shared my first fifth step. And of course, my first sponsor, she didn't reject me. She didn't tell me I was the worst person that ever lived or anything like that. But I shared that and I started to feel not so alone. And it really was the first time I did my very first ever fifth step that I really began to feel a part of this thing, like I belonged here in 12 step. But it was really when I began to receive the fifth steps of others. And they would share with me their deep, dark secret, that shame, their inventory, that stuff that they don't want to tell everyone. And see, I am a fall down failure of a human being. I am riddled with defects, riddled with them. I am a drunk. I am an addict. I am a fall down failure of a human being. And these people would share with me their experience and how I felt about them always changed, but not in the way that I ever expected. See, they shared with me that deep, dark secret, and I loved them more. I loved them more. I can't stay sober on my own power, and I love them more. I can't overcome resentments on my own power, and I love them more. I can't overcome fear on my own power, and I love them more. I can't live up to my sex ideal, and I love them more. And if this is how I feel about them, as again, a riddled failure of a human being, how might that unconditional love that is God feel about them, feel about you, right? That is where I learned about the unconditional nature of God's love. Because I'm not showing up here and loving greater than God is. I'm not winning at the love department. I'm definitely not. Now, almost invariably, they got drunk. And it says, having persevered with the rest of the program, they wondered why they fell. We think the reason is that they never completed their house cleaning. They took inventory all right, but hung on to some of the worst items in stock. They only thought they had lost their egoism and fear. They only thought they had humbled themselves. But they had not learned enough humility and fearlessness and honesty in the sense that we find it necessary until they told someone else all their life story. Now, all their life story, that is the contents of their fourth step. And right there, now this is one of those things, I call these the Missy Elliot Promises. Now, if you go to a meeting and you go, hey, bring up a topic. Hey, let's talk about the Missy Elliot Promises. I want you to know that most people probably won't know what you're talking about, but this is what I call them. And so if you remember Missy Elliot, she had the song came out in like 2002, and it was called Work It. And I'm sure that Missy Elliot was absolutely talking about the program of action contained in the book Alcoholics Anonymous when she said work it. I can't think of anything else she could possibly be referring to. And in that song, she says, like, is it worth it? Let me work it. And if you're wondering, if you're here, if you've not taken the 12 steps, it is worth it. Let's work it together. Let's take the actions of the 12 steps, take it out of this book together. And then she says, I put my thing down, flip it, and reverse it. Then it goes, and I flip it, you know? And you're wondering where I get this musical talent. It's a gift, right? And the flip down, flip it, and reverse it, right? And so at this point is I like to put it down, flip it, and reverse it, right? And so let's look at what the opposite is of these, what I call the Missy Elliot Promises. So if I don't do the 5th step, if I keep these secrets to myself, if I keep this stuff to myself, I will and hold on to some of those worst items in stock. I will only think that I lose my egoism and fear. But if I fearlessly and dive in and do this 5th step, I will lose my egoism and fear. And I will humble myself. And I will learn enough humility and fearlessness and honesty in the sense that I tell someone all my life story. So there are 5th step promises. Those are not the 5th step promises. They're the Missy Elliot ones. Yeah. And I don't know, I just think it's a fun way to introduce them. And I love doing that because sometimes we see things, but if I flip it, I get a new meaning and I really see what we're talking about. And what is on offer here is freedom, real freedom at depth. So it says, more than most people, the alcoholic leads a double life. He is very much the actor. To the outer world, he presents a stage character. This is the one he likes his fellows to see. He wants to enjoy a certain reputation, but knows in his heart he doesn't deserve it. And what we're tying back to is the 3rd step when we spoke about the actor playing the director, right? Trying to run the whole show. And in this instance, me being the actor trying to run the whole show, what am I trying to protect? I'm trying to protect that character that you see. I'm trying to protect my ego and my image. I talk about it a lot, being ego and image maintenance. I need you to think well of me for me to be okay. And I need to keep up the appearances. And I need you to think well of me. But it talks about in his heart, he knows he doesn't deserve it. The appearances that I'm trying to keep up. And earlier on in the book, it talks about outward appearances are not inward reality at all. The outward appearances that on my own power I'm trying to present are not what's really going on. And it says the inconsistency is made worse by the things he does on his sprees. He comes to his senses. Coming to his senses, he is revolted at certain episodes he vaguely remembers. These memories are a nightmare. He trembles to think someone might have observed him. As fast as he can, he pushes these memories far inside himself. He hopes they will never see the light of day. He is under constant fear and tension. That makes for more drinking. And so what happens is I do these things, especially on my sprees that are filled with guilt and shame and remorse. And what is my natural inclination? What is the thing that I naturally want to do? I'll tell you, it's not. A solitary self-appraisal is insufficient and I need to share it with others. No, I want to stuff that stuff down. I want to push it down far inside of myself. I hope no one saw me. I hope no. And I feel that guilt and that shame. And then I try to pour alcohol on top of it to get a sense of relief because I can't stand the things I've done and I can't stand who I've become, right? And it says he hopes they will never see the light of day. That line, you know, one of the things I just love throughout this book Yes, absolutely. Run, hide, duck, weave. It's, oh, what's it? The dodgeball. If you can dodge a defect, you can dodge a ball. It's a wrench. But it's like, I want to duck, dive, dodge, weave. I want to do all the dodgeball things, right? I don't want to look at it. I don't want to be honest about where I'm at. I want to pretend it's not a part of me and push it down. And when it talks about how we hope they will never see the light of day, one of my favorite metaphors in this whole book is as God as light. And time after time, the metaphor of God as light is just, it's so beautiful. And some of us have heard that expression, like secrets grow in the dark, but they die in the light. And what I need is to let God's light in on those secrets and on that stuff and on that inventory, right? And sometimes it's like, why do we have to admit to God? God already knows these things. I'm sharing this with God because I'm letting God's light in. That's what I'm doing, that admitting, letting in. And welcome those who just joined us. We're on page 73. And it says he is under constant fear and tension. That makes for more drinking. Because when I'm holding on to these things, I'm blocked from that sunlight of the Spirit. And when I'm blocked from the sunlight of the Spirit, the insanity of alcohol returns, that mental obsession comes back, and I get that thought, this time will be different. Nobody will ever know. You know, F them, I need a drink. And off I go. And for us, to drink is to die. And it says psychologists are inclined to agree with us. We have spent thousands of dollars for examinations. We know of but a few instances where we have given these doctors a fair break. We have seldom told them the whole truth, nor have we followed their advice. It's a little rude of the book to call me out like that. A little rude. You know, so we'll go and we'll seek help, therapists, doctors, counselors, psychologists, psychiatrists, and they're like, how much you been drinking? Oh, not that much, you know, and they'll give suggestions and things that we can do. Don't do them. I mean, I'm convinced they couldn't possibly help, but I won't do them, right? And isn't that how I show up? You know, hopefully we've been beaten into a state of reasonableness, so we're not showing up that way with our sponsors, but that's kind of how I naturally want to do, right? So it says, unwilling to be honest with these sympathetic men. We were honest with no one else. Small wonder many in the medical profession have a low opinion of alcoholics and their chance of recovery. And this is an important line. It says we must be entirely honest with somebody. Somebody. I don't have to come to a meeting like this. This is probably not the place to do it. Come and show up to a meeting like this and share my inventory with all of you. Although that being said, the freedom I have today is I could. Those deep, dark secrets, those things that I didn't want to share with anyone, if it would be helpful, I could share it with anyone today freely. Freely. That is the freedom that's on offer. But it says we must be entirely honest with somebody if we expect to live long or happily in this world. And when I got here, I couldn't think of anything worse than living a long life the way that I was living it. That seemed like agony, and that seemed like absolute hell on earth. And it says long or happily. And to be honest, the way that I was living my life, happiness was so out of grasp. Truly, when I got here, what I could hope for was I could hope to want to be happy. I couldn't want to be happy. I couldn't hope to be happy. I sure as heck wasn't happy, but I could hope to want to be happy. And that was the best I could do. And the reality is I probably was not going to live long the way that I was living it, because the way that I was living it was not ingratiating itself to a long life, right? And even when I was able to put the substances down, I was stuck with me. And I would very regularly get that thought, I don't need to be here. And I would very regularly act on that thought, I don't need to be here. And see, that is the stuff that I got here, and I didn't think these 12 steps could help with that. And like so often in my life, I have been wrong. So if I want to live a long and happy life, I need to do this step I need all of them. I do need to do all of them, but this is one of them that I have to do. And so now we're transitioning into who do I do my fifth step with? So it says, rightly and naturally, we think well before we choose the person or persons with whom to take this intimate and confidential step. And one of the things I want to point out is often we do a fifth step one-on-one, but we can do what's called a two-on-one, where there's two people receiving that fifth step. Also, this is going to be subjective. If you've done a lot of inventory, you'll be with me on this, where like a cool, fun thing to do. If you haven't done a lot of inventory yet, this is going to sound like just the worst idea Paige has ever had. But what you can do is you can take the same inventory and share it with multiple people to get that different perspective. And that's always like a really cool thing to do. Or awful. I mean, it's cool after we've done it, right? And so at this point is when I would naturally be like, okay, who is the best person to take our inventory to? And I would just kind of talk about that. But my friend John Jay in Winnipeg, he showed me this cool little tie-in. So who is the first person that is on the list of who I can take my inventory to? Well, let's bounce around and go to page 96. So if we go to page 96, and the paragraph we're on is the second full paragraph where it says, suppose now. So we are talking in the chapter working with others. So the chapter is for us carrying this message to others. So it says, suppose now you're making your second visit to a man. I'm just going to point out it does not take long to get well. Visit number 2, already getting ready to take some action. He has read this volume and says he is prepared to go through with the 12 steps of the program of recovery. Having had the experience yourself, you can give him much practical advice. Let him know you are available if he wishes to make a decision. That would be his third step, and tell his story. This is his fifth step. But do not insist upon it if he prefers to consult somebody else. So the first person that is a good person to have on my list on who can I take my fifth step, how can I take my inventory to, who can I do my fifth step with? My sponsor. My sponsor is the first, most logical, makes the most sense. Do it with my sponsor, right? Because my sponsor is going to understand. Now, if when I work with my sponsees, now not everyone does it this way, and not everyone has the time or the energy to be able to do it this way. But when I sit with my sponsees, I sit with them as they go through their fourth step. And oftentimes I'll help them as they're writing their fourth step. And because I've been with them throughout the whole process, I mean, I haven't rejected them yet. So they're likely to do it with me because I've not yet rejected them, and I am not likely to. So they're willing to take that leap of faith. But it's also okay if we don't want to do it with our sponsor. Our sponsor probably is the best person to do it with. But keep in mind, in 2023, we have people all over the world, recovered people who have taken this course of action, who have had the spiritual awakening all over the world that you can do it with. Absolutely. You can, I mean, honestly, there's people on this Zoom call all over the world that you could do your fifth step with, right? So that would be first as our sponsor, second, another recovered person who has taken these actions, who's had these experiences. That's probably our second person. Now, keep in mind, the book was written 3738, published in 1939. And the book went out to carry this message. And I might be alone in the world. I'm not today. I'm not, definitely not. We're all hanging out, having a great time, I hope. Right? I'm not alone in the world, but I might be alone in the world with only a copy of this book and doing the best I can alone to follow its directions. So it's got to give me some people whom I can do my fifth step with, or some examples of people that might be good to reach out to for that. So if I don't want to do it with my sponsor, or if I'm not sure I want to do it with another recovered member, that's okay. Here's another option. Option number 3. Those of us belonging to a religious denomination which requires confession must, and of course will, want to go to the properly appointed authority whose duty it is to receive it. Though we have no religious connection, we may still do well to talk with someone ordained by established religion. We often find such a person quick to see and understand our problem. Of course, we sometimes encounter people who do not understand alcoholics. So what is our problem? My problem is that I am blocked from God. I am blocked from God through my selfishness, my self-centeredness, my fear, all my defects of character. That is my problem. And so somebody ordained by religion is likely to have an understanding of, oh, okay, so you got to get that stuff out so that you can continue to take action and connect with a power greater than yourself. No worries. Thank you so much for coming. Where I live in the world, there's a place called Mount St. Francis, and it's a Franciscan retreat center. And the people who, the Franciscan brothers who live there and work there, they do a number of things. But one of the things they do that they have dedicated themselves to is receiving fifth steps. And so these are people who have listened to a whole lot of fifth steps, and they understand the process, and they understand kind of what we're doing. And so those are good people to take our fifth step to. Not everyone has that privilege of having an understanding community that happens to also be religious, and sometimes people prefer that because it's somebody they don't ever have to see again, they're not going to run into. It's just better we do it, right? That being said, in my experience, I have done a lot, like a lot of fifth steps, like a lot. And during the course of my time, I've done it with, long story short, I bored two nuns, two of them. See, that's the thing. I show up and I think I'm a bit of a badass, like, ooh, I've done some stuff. Nope, I bored them. Two separate inventories, two separate nuns bored, which, you know, I think I'm more interesting than I am, which is really my problem. But they can be wonderful people to, you know, take our inventory to as well. And of course, not everyone who is in a religion or religious organizations understand. So there are some questions we can ask before we go and do that. Now it says, if we cannot or would rather not do this, we search our acquaintance for a closed-mouth understanding friend. Again, we can find a closed-mouth understanding friend in 12 step. That just makes the most sense. Perhaps our doctor or psychologist will be the person. And I don't know what your general practitioner is like, but like probably not. Like it's like, can you imagine you go see your GP and they're like, okay, what's the problem? We got 15 minutes. And it's like, okay, so I am resentful towards, you know, just imagine, right? And like, yeah, so that is maybe not the most applicable. And also what I will say is a psychologist, again, not the worst, but often psychologists are going at it from a different angle than we are. So what we're looking at is where I have been at fault, where have been my mistakes. And that's not always the lens. Now there are some, but also most appointments are like an hour, you know? And like, if some of them are expensive, like $200 an hour or something like that, like if you get one of the like fancy ones. And all I'm saying is, if you do it with another alcoholic, it's free. You know what I mean? So just consider that. No worries. Thank you so much for coming, and glad you're here. All right. So, and then it says, it may be one of our own family. I mean, I feel like in this day and age, we don't need to, but we cannot disclose anything to our wives or parents. Oh, could you imagine taking your sex inventory to like a wife or a spouse or a parent? No, which will hurt them and make them unhappy. We have no right to save our own skin at another person's expense. So while in today's day and age, we don't have to do our inventory, share our fifth step with our parents or our spouse, That is a very useful principle. I have no right to save my own skin at another person's expense. And we're going to see that principle carry on into the directions with step 9. Such parts of our story we will tell to someone who will understand yet be unaffected. If you're wondering, your sponsor will understand it and be unaffected. Absolutely. And it says the rule. And I love this rule. This is the rule. This is the standard that I am holding myself to. The rule is we must be hard on ourselves, but always considerate of others. Now see, I am also somebody who oscillates towards self-hatred at times. The hard on ourselves is not beating ourselves up, but holding myself to that standard and always considerate of others, right? So that's the rule. Notwithstanding the great necessity for discussing ourselves with someone, it may be that one is so situated there is no suitable person available. No, absolutely not. No. I've got I'm looking on my screen. I can connect you with a whole, apparently I can't count. As those who were before the meeting, I'm like, I can't do basic math. The basic math in this moment did not get better over the course of me talking about the 5th step. But there's a whole whack of people that you could do on this call right now, including myself, 8. Yeah, the number from earlier was 8, and I'm sure there's at least 8 people on the call. Yeah, we'll just roll with that one. That could receive your 5th step, including myself. So if you need to do a 5th step, you let me know. We'll do a 5th step. I don't care where you live in the world. What I've learned is that the spiritual message can be transmitted not just on by mail as well as by word of mouth, but over the virtual screens. So there is no reason to postpone. We can get you connected. Let's get it done. Let's get you the freedom. Absolutely not. No postponement. There's no valid reason. Not applicable. If that is so, the step may be postponed. No. Only, however, if we hold ourselves in complete readiness to go through it with the first opportunity. We say this because we're very anxious that we talk to the right person. And one of the things is it doesn't give us in the book a lot of description on how to receive a 5th step, on how to listen to a 5th step. And this part of the book is one of those places where if I Missy Elliot a little, I can see who I need to be able to receive a 5th step. So it says, it is important that he be able to keep a confidence. Can I keep what I hear to myself? Absolutely, I can. That he fully understand and approve of what we are driving at. Yes. What are we driving at? To clear away the stuff inside of us that's blocking us from that power, which is God. I understand and I approve. I have approved this step. I'm just making a joke. I don't get to, audit them and say, I approve, but that he will not try to change our plan. No, if anything, I will encourage us to take this action, right? But we must not use this as a mere excuse to postpone. When we decide who is to hear our story, we waste no time. It's one of those things, the 4th step, I don't want to sit on it. Get it done. It doesn't take long. It can be painful sitting on it. Similarly, that time in between 4 and 5, I've got this inventory and it's sitting around and I'm worrying and in my head about, oh no, what's going to happen in 5? Will I be rejected? This and that. Get it done. Get it done. Dive in. Waste no time. That's what it's saying. We have a written inventory, check, and we are prepared for a long talk. So again, if I'm wondering whether or not I've been searching and fearless in my 4th step, well, we saw last week, it says, if we've been thorough with this, we have written down a lot. Did I write down a lot? Now, to go over this with my sponsor, whoever is receiving the 5th step, isn't going to be a long talk, right? And it says he should realize that we are engaged upon, we explain to our partner what we are about to do and why we have to do it. He should realize that we are engaged upon a life and death errand. Do I understand that as somebody that is receiving this fifth step, that this is a life and death matter? Most people approached in this way will be glad to help. They will be honored by our confidence. And so I just kind of want to share a little bit about my experience sort of receiving fifth steps. So one of the things that I do is I like, if I know I'm going to receive a fifth step, I book the day. Like I book the day. I try to just have that be the only thing that I'm doing that day. There are some people who can that will only receive like a fifth step only a couple hours at a time. I'm not like that. I'm a get her done sort of. I was a bit of a get her done sort of drinker, and I'm a bit of a get her done sort of fifth step listener too. Like I want to get it done. And actually, it was because of my experience, my very, very first fifth step. We had to do it over a couple of sessions, and that time in between was just really painful. And so for me, I like to get it done. But I also, if I have sponsees that can only sit for a bit, I meet them where they're at, right? But I like getting it done. And so what I do is I sit with my sponsees, and either face-to-face if preferable, but sometimes that's not possible with all my sponsees because sometimes we don't live in the same part of the world. And we start with a prayer. Like I do every time when I work with my sponsees, we start with a prayer because we're inviting God into this process. And then one of the things I like to do is I like to start with asking, hey, before we get into it, I'm just going to ask, do you got like that deep, dark secret that you don't want to tell me about it? I know it's a little awkward to start with it, but why don't we rip off the Band-Aid and then get into it? How do you feel about that? And if they're able to share it, then they're able to share it then. And one of the things is I always ask at the end as well, is there anything else? Is there anything else that you have left off this inventory or anything else that you haven't shared? So I'll bookend it like that. In part so that if they have that secret, they can just get it off when we get into the inventory and it's just going. Now, what I have my sponsees do is I just have them read to me their inventory, and they share with me their inventory. Now, again, with most of my sponsees, I help them write it, and I've sat with them as they've gone through. So I don't have that much feedback because I've already given them the feedback as we went through. But if it's somebody that I didn't take through the 4-step process, I offer feedback around that 4th column especially. But one of the things I learned to do is to, and this is something I do, not every sponsor does it, not everyone does it, and it's probably because I've already heard all the stuff before, so it's given me an activity to do, give me something to do, keeping me busy. What I do is I write down what I hear my sponsees say their defects of character are. And I always start by writing selfish, which is how I act in the world, and self-centered, which is how I think and perceive in the world. Because those all of my defects of character can fall into one of those 2 categories. And so I start with those, and I don't write what I think. I write what I hear them say through the inventory process. And then they have that list that they can take into their quiet hour, and they can take into 6 and 7. And then one of the things is we spoke about last week about sex ideals and what is a sex ideal and how do we get them? And again, it gives me something to do. So I will write what I hear them say from their 4th column, their sex ideal is. Not what I think it should be, but this is just something that I do. And then I give it to them because I don't need it. I'm not keeping it. It's theirs. They can have it, and they can take that that list of defects. They can take that to their quiet hour. They can take that to their 6 and 7, and they can take that sex ideal and take it to prayer, right? And so just something I do. Nobody has to do. Just something I do. And so now is when we get the description on how to do a 5th step. So here it is. This is how we share our 5th step. This is what we do. We pocket our pride and go to it, illuminating every twisted character, every dark cranny in the past. That's it. That's the description. That's how we do it. Pocket our pride, go to it. Go do it. And I know it's not as involved as I think we would like it to be. And for me, yeah, I just have my sponsees read and share with me their inventory. And one of the things, this might be helpful as well. I say that if you wrote it, I will listen to it. but we're not going to have discussion on column 2. Only discussion on column 4. So on what my mistakes, my wrongs, my faults were. Because if we have discussion on column 2, I don't need that information. That's just going to take our time. It's going to be a long, long talk, right? And so column 4, that's where we have the discussion. That's where we spend time talking back and forth. And also I will share my experiences too. I will share, hey, I did that. And I'll share, hey, I've done that and that as well. And so now what we see are the step 5 promises. So we have the description, pocket our pride, go to it, illuminating every twisted character, every dark cranny of the past. And these are the actual 5th step promises. And again, before we get into that, I want to talk about illuminating, right? Light, bringing that light to every dark cranny, every twisted character, letting that light in. Gosh, this is where we learn that we're not alone. And I love, God is light. I'm just letting God into myself and into these parts of me and into this process. And these are the step 5 promises. It says, once we have taken this step, withholding nothing, we are delighted. Delighted. Girl, if you told me that like the result of step 5, before I ever did any of them, the result was going to be delighted, I would have been like, you must be out of your mind. Delighted? Absolutely not, right? But delighted. And it says, we can look the world in the eye. I don't know about you, but when I got here, I wasn't looking anyone in the eye. When I would sit in the rooms, I would be intimately acquainted with that square of floor that was right in front of me. I knew that square of floor really, really well. I wasn't looking at you in the eyes. And why am I able to look you in the eyes? Because I'm experiencing true humility. No better than you, no worse than you. For somebody like me, fully dependent and reliant upon God. And it says we can be alone at perfect peace and ease. And I love that. See, if you remember on page 1, we were talking about Bill's story. In Bill's story, he says, I was very lonely and again turned to alcohol. And if we go to page 164, we talk about that chilling vapor that is loneliness settled down. Loneliness has nothing to do with physical proximity to another human being. Loneliness has everything to do with a sense of separateness from God. See, again, I don't know about you, but I know I have felt alone in a stadium full of others. I felt absolutely alone in a room full of people. I felt alone in a relationship, and I felt absolutely alone in the middle of an act of intimacy. It has everything to do with the sense of separateness from God. But now I can be physically alone at perfect peace and ease. And it says our fears fall from us. And that is the pattern that my defects of character have taken. They fall from me. And when they fall from me, I know I didn't do it. Yes, I took the actions. I worked it, as Missy Elliot would say, right? But it fell. I didn't produce the results. It happened to me, and it was a gift. And it says we begin to feel the nearness of our Creator. Our Creator. We may have had certain spiritual beliefs, but we now begin to have a spiritual experience. This is where that spiritual experience really takes off. And this thing is not, again, it's not into intellectualizing. It's not into understanding intellectually. It's not into talking about it, reading about it. It is into action. I take the action and I awaken to the experience. It is a spiritual experience. And it says, the feeling that the drink problem has disappeared will often come strongly. We feel we are on the broad highway, capital B, capital H. Now, the last time we saw broad highway was in step 2. And if we were willing to search fearlessly, we could be on this broad highway. And here we are, we're on this capital B, capital H, broad highway, walking hand in hand with the capital S, capital U, Spirit of the universe, hand in hand. See, that's the thing. I can be alone at perfect peace and ease because I know I'm not alone. And often with my sponsees, what I tell them is my job is to take your hand and put it in God's hands. That is my responsibility, hand in hand with the spirit of the universe. I am truly no longer alone. And man, if you told me that would be the result of the fifth step, I would not have believed you. But as a human being who has had to do many fifth steps and not had to get to, it's truly a privilege now because I get to know that power which is God more and more. That truly has been my experience. So we're going to leave it there for now, and we're going to pick up next week as we get into the directions for the quiet hour, which, I mean, that sounds like rest into action section. Absolutely not. There's action in that quiet hour, more action. But stay tuned next week, we'll get into that action.